Wine. It's simply crushed and fermented grapes. It's the variations and the stories that make it so fascinating. Wine grapes grow all over our planet. The same grape grown in one part of the world might taste dramatically different when grown in another part of the globe. Even within a single region, you find differences in soils, climate, weather, elevations, all of which impact the grape, making it taste different when it finally arrives in your glass. This beverage has the ability to tell you the story of a year in the place that it calls home. Home for wine grapes is typically beautiful, from the high desert of the Yakima Valley to the evergreen forest of Oregon or the beautiful southern highlands region of Australia. Wine likes a view. These regions are often off the beaten path, and the scenery you go through to reach them can be stunning. I love that we talk about wine breathing. It's a reminder that wine is always changing. There are over 200 aromas that can be detected in wine, from the grassy smell of a Sauvignon Blanc to the earthy scent of mushrooms in a Pinot Noir. These aromas are released as the wine breathes, changing even as you enjoy a single glass. And perhaps even more important than any of this are the stories of the wineries, the journeys of the winemakers and the people who love these wines, their philosophies, and the different ways they bring their reverence to the grape. In this series, we explore different wine regions around the globe. We want to give you a feel for the place and region, things you can do and see, and explore regional culinary delights. We will visit the regions, speak with the winemakers, taste their wines, and then bring a bottle home to create a recipe that pairs perfectly. Our goal is to inspire you to take the scenic route. Our first stop on our series is Oregon. When you think of Oregon, you picture green hills, rain, and beards, don't you? We found lots of the first, very little of the second, and enough of the third to keep the myth alive. When it comes to wine in Oregon, it's probably Pinot Noir that first comes to mind. The Pinot here can be truly amazing, but there are other grapes that forward-thinking and creative growers in the region have planted, from Chardonnay and Riesling to rarer creatures like Savagnin and Trousseau. The Willamette Valley AVA in western Oregon runs 60 miles east-west and 100 miles north to south, and is filled with 11 sub-AVAs, each with its distinctive climate and soils. Today, we are headed to one of those nested AVAs, Ribbon Ridge. Ribbon Ridge is the tiniest of Oregon's AVAs size-wise, but this tiny AVA has big ideas. The ridge itself was once a tiny island when this area was covered in ocean. It is set out a little from the Chehalem Mountains and is a nested AVA within the larger Chehalem Mountains AVA. It's the soil that sets it apart. This 5¼ square mile area has uniform soils of ocean sediment which are younger than those of the surrounding areas. The first vineyard was planted here in 1980, and soon it grew to a community of wine growers, all of whom were independent thinkers. Most of these pioneers held similar beliefs in farming, but they were each headstrong and independent, and it wasn't until 2015 that they came together to create a statement of principles, setting forth the path for water conservation, sustainability, and philanthropy within the Ribbon Ridge AVA. Meet Dan Warscheis, president of the Ribbon Ridge AVA, and the force that brought these independent personalities together to create one of the most environmentally forward-thinking AVAs in the nation.
Ribbon Ridge was not really, it was considered too far west to really ripen, and that's why a lot of the early development was over in the Red Hills of Dundee, which is more east and it's a bit warmer. But they believed in it, and they also started out farming, organic or biodynamic. I mean, maybe not from the very beginning, but I know that Doug has been a big leader on the biodynamics, and Harry, he wrote the original draft. Him and Dewey and Doug all wrote the original draft for Ribbon Ridge to become an AVA. And then in the 90s I came along, and over time, from the late 90s into the early 2000s, Ribbon Ridge took on a lot of new vineyards, new wineries came in. It became a much more desirable place after these guys had kind of proven it, right? And so, being a very small AVA, we have a lot of family-owned wineries, and which is really great. And the early pioneers influenced everyone kind of in their farming. We know, like I was inspired by the vignerons in Burgundy, the small family guys that are farming biodynamic or organic, and they're the farmer, they're the winemaker, they live on the estate, right? That's what inspired me to do Utopia, and these guys are kind of in that mold, as I am now, And in 2014, there was a little bit of consensus that, hey, Ribbon Ridge has really come a long ways, and we need to, start getting together and really promoting it for its value. All the things that we're doing in terms of our farming practices, but also, the philanthropy that we're doing, giving back to the community and conserving water, all of those sustainability issues that you talk about, and plus the great wines, of course, that are coming out of Ribbon Ridge. I mean, all you have to do is look at a list of the wineries here and the wines for this little tiny AVA. I mean, I think, on a percentage basis, we've got to be the top in Oregon of the high scoring wines that come out of the Willamette Valley. In 2014, we did have a meeting at Beaufrere, and everybody kind of came together at that point, even though it wasn't really, there was no organization per se. It was like, well, let's just have a meeting and talk about what, we might want to do in terms of an association. But in 2015, I really kind of took charge, and that's when we started to say, well, what are the things that are important to us, and that statement of principles that's on our website, on the ribbonridgeava.org website, spells out, taking care of the workers, taking care of the land, taking care of the community, farming right in order to preserve for future generations, and giving back and creating a real legacy. Those are the things that you'll find there. And everybody that's in our association, they sign up for that. And so, one of the things that we do is we do not use any chemical herbicides in the entire AVA. So, I mean, that's a really big deal. I don't know of any other AVAs that do that. So that's a pretty big deal. So that's kind of how I came to be the president of Ribbon Ridge Wine Growers. I guess I probably stepped forward when everybody else was stepping back, right? And by default, and then since then, people have been happy with what I'm doing, and the leadership that I'm providing around the things that we're doing, and now we have the new website, we have the new map, and the brochures, and we have our classes, and we do things as a group. We just did the Ribbon Ridge Excursion for the Wine Media Conference. That was something that never would have happened in the past.
Vitis vinifera is the species of grape that we most commonly use to make wine. Within that species, you have varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay. Some of these varieties are prone to mutations, little variations to the plant that make the grapes different. Pinot is especially prone to these variations. You see this with the mutations of Pinot Noir to Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris. Beyond these major color variations, there are small variations, some created naturally, some propagated. In the vineyard, when a viticulturalist sees a variation that they like, they take a cutting to preserve and propagate this variation. These are the clones. With Pinot Noir so susceptible to these variations, you find many clonal varieties. Some are better with warmer or cooler climates, some have better disease resistance, and in many, they can change the characteristics of the fruit, with some having more tannin and structure, or variations in aromas and textures. Because of this, winemakers who make Pinot Noir often blend different clones into their wines. This can give the wine balance, utilizing the tannin and structure of one clone with the fruit-forward character of another, and adding another clone that gives the wine a plushness or silkiness. Think of this as variations within variations. Again, one of those things that makes wine so fascinating. When we visited Dan, it was in the heat of late summer in early August of 2021. We spent a bit of time learning more about this vineyard, its soils, and grapes.
So we're standing at the top of Utopia Vineyard right now, located in the Ribbon Ridge AVA, right on Ribbon Ridge Road proper. And this property I started in 2000 when I purchased the land. It was a horse pasture at that time, and I've done 3 plantings. So 2002 over on this side of the alley, and then 2005 over here, which includes a bunch of heirloom clones from existing vineyards. And then finally up at top here in 2010, which includes the bulk of the Chardonnay. I've got 12 different Pinot Noir clones. So I've got, Calera. I've got some unusual ones. I've got some California clones. I've got Calera and Swan, and I have both Reed and Jensen from Calera, but then I have a lot of the Dijon clones like 115 and 667 and 777. I've got 3 different blocks of Pomard on different rootstocks, and then I've got one of those is Shea Pomard, which were heirloom clones, and some Shea Vadensville, and then I've got another block of Vadensville that were young vines from the nursery in my original planting in 02. And I also have some Archery Summit Arcus Vineyard, the 2 and 3, which we believe are 828 clone, which is another one of the Dijon clones. And then I've got the 3 low-yielding Chardonnay clones, Dijon 76, 95, and 96, all here. So a total of 15 blocks. All the different clones are in separate blocks. And when we harvest, we keep them separate in tanks and then in barrels. And then when we get right about this time of year, I finalize the blends from tasting the barrels, and then we rack everything into the different wines, and then go ahead from there and stabilize and filter and bottle. And I'm doing that in September this year. So you can see that we're getting a fair amount of color now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's moving pretty rapidly in some of these blocks now. We're probably 40% Veraison already at this point. It's August 10th.
Right.
2021. So, I mean, it's not like we're that far ahead for a hotter year, though, definitely. I'm thinking harvest is going to probably be around September 10th right now. This is just a little field measurement device, a refractometer, and I'm just going to check the bricks real quick. Yeah, we're still sitting at about 14.
Gotcha.
So, another 4 or
time.
5 weeks, depending on the weather, to get through this. And that's just, one berry. So, we've got a little more time to get ready. Thank God. So, I'm happy about that. But we're at a stage now. We've done, 90% of the farming. I mean, we obviously have harvest, which is a big deal. But as far as the actual farming prior to harvest is pretty much complete, and we're just letting it hang now. Yeah.
Right.
But so far so good. You can see the vines still have a fair amount of vigor. They haven't dried out so badly yet because they're mature vines, and I'm pretty happy with the way things are. I would like to see a little bit of rain prior to harvest just to help balance things out and get a little more hang time to get some more phenolic ripening. But overall, looking at this site, I feel pretty good given the year that we've had.
Excellent. Tell me about soils here.
Marine sedimentary. All of Willamette Valley was under the sea at one point about 50 million years ago, and now through the normal volcanic activity, the mountains came up, the sea got pushed back. And this little strip of land is, it got stranded. It got left behind during all that upheaval. And so it's kind of uniformly marine sedimentary. Most AVAs are a blend of different soil types, right? And we certainly have some, minor differences here, but we're primarily and pretty uniformly marine sedimentary across Ribbon Ridge. And it is the smallest AVA in Oregon. So if you actually were in the air looking down on it, it really looks like an island kind of floating out in the middle, of the surrounding sites. And geographically and geologically, it's this lifted landmass.
Just up the road from the vineyard and tasting room, Utopia has another piece of property where they have the Utopia Log Cabin. Tucked into evergreen forest and vineyard land, this 2-story log cabin has a deck with spectacular views of the Ribbon Ridge. This beautiful cabin allows you to get away into nature while still providing you with all the modern conveniences. The views of the stars at night are truly breathtaking. And I dare you to find a better place to enjoy a morning cup of coffee. I always find it interesting to hear a winemaker's story. What brought them to wine, and how did they settle on a particular spot in the universe to grow and make wine? Here's Dan's story.
So tell me about your history and how you came to Utopia and how you found this place.
Well, I mean, Utopia was, it was something that I imagined in my early adulthood, when I started to get into collecting fine wines, and then going to the vineyards in Napa and Sonoma and, wherever, Paso, wherever I was, if there was a wine country, I would visit it, and anyone that's been in a vineyard sipping a glass of wine at sunset and watching the sun, peek through the leaves and stuff has probably imagined owning a vineyard and being a winemaker, and that was something that I imagined. And then I imagined, as I got further into it, doing it like I said, the vignerons that inspired me out of Burgundy, just these families that are just generation after generation, and they're farming, and it's just a whole lifestyle. I mean, it's so cool because it's everything is wrapped up into the land and the wines that you're making, and it really is truly a lifestyle, and that to me was very inspiring. It's like, well, if you only get to live once, I would like to live that way if I could. Of course, I have 3 daughters and a wife and, a couple dogs and a couple cats, and I'm working in technology, and we're trying to, survive in the Bay Area. And, but I always, thought, well, you can't just dream, you have to take action. Okay. You have to do the first thing. And so what is the first thing that you have to do? Well, the first thing you have to do is learn about wine. So then you start learning about wine. And how does wine go from a winery to a consumer? And what are all the steps, and who are the players, and how do you get into that slipstream for the really fine wines, right? So that was my initial goal, was to really understand how does the worldwide wine market actually work, and how can I get really good wine for cheap or for less than retail. What do I have to know, and what do I have to do? And so I started collecting, and I'm a very inquisitive guy, so I'm asking a lot of questions, and I don't care, I'll just keep asking until I get the answer that I think is the right answer, and I'm very persistent at that. And of course I'm reading, I'm buying somm guides and taking UC Davis courses, and I have a science background from Michigan State. I have a Bachelor of Science, and so I have a thought process. I learned how to think in college, and the more I went, after collecting, eventually I started an import-export, wholesale retail business in Napa, and then I really started to get exposed to all the regional distributors in Napa. I won't name them, but we all know who they are. They're all calling on me now and offering me these wines, and I'm tasting 200 wines a week, and so that's a good way to, hone your palate and train your palate, and then to learn. And then I'm meeting a lot of the winemakers, especially the up and coming guys, because I'm helping them to market their wines, and now they're my friends, and I'm getting even more kind of understanding, and I'm starting to hang out in the vineyards, and I'm starting to hang out in the winery during harvest, and even not during harvest, and going in the barrel rooms and tasting all these great wines, and so I'm just getting more and more inspired. And so we'll start to try to do a little bit of custom crush, but I don't have the kind of control that I want. And then I read this article in 1998, I think it was in Sunset or Living Magazine or something like that. Some big publication that said, the Willamette Valley is going to become the next Napa Valley in 20 years. That was the headline. And I said, oh my gosh, that's where I want to go. because this is it. You have to go right now, because if you don't go now, it's going to be too late. And a lot of people are going to be kicking themselves, but I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and make that move. So I started very earnestly, and I'd already written the Utopia business plan at that point, but like 3 years before that. And I started really earnestly looking. And I don't think anybody really believed me that I was really going to do it, including my family. But I was really serious about doing it. And I did get a tip to go look at this farm below me in 2000, in the fall of 2000, which is now the Pré du Col Vineyard. But it was up for sale at that time. And when I got down there, I was like, yeah, this is okay. But that's the spot, meaning this ground up here. It was way better ground. It was all cleared. It was just pasture. Didn't cut down a single tree. It's ideal elevation. It's all south facing. It's like mid slope. I mean, if it was in Burgundy, it would literally be a Grand Cru designated site based on its physical, and topography characteristics. So I just said, well, let's just go see if the guy wants to sell it, because it's everything I've been looking for. And there was a particular vineyard manager with me from a famous vineyard, and she didn't want to do that. So I said, well, then wait here and I'll go ask him. And I drove up here and I knocked on the door, and the guy literally sold me the property on the spot. That's how I acquired this property. So Utopia was then born.
Excellent.
And then, I just kept going. And 21 years later now, developed it from scratch, built all these buildings, built our home, planted the 17 acres, and in 2018 expanded to the new property where you saw last night, and the new winery. And now I make wine for myself and for other people, and I'm the president of River Ridge Wine Growers. So I guess I've come a long ways.
The new property, where the Utopia Log Cabin sits, will soon be home to additional vineyard blocks. New vineyard land that they are preparing to plant. And it already holds the Utopia Winery. Dane converted the 5,500 square foot building on the property to a winery complete with barrel storage, tanks, bins, and a crush pad. Having the winery so close to the vineyard means Dan doesn't have to travel his grapes far to make his wine. This is good for the grapes and good for Dan, who lives on the property at the vineyard.
So this is a 2015 Estate Pinot. This is currently in our flight. We're pouring a library vertical of our Estate Pinot. And the one that I call Estate is a blend of all 12.
Okay.
The other ones I give names to.
Okay.
So the 2015 Estate Pinot Noir, the year most similar to 2021
Okay.
in terms of the heat. I mean, the blocks aren't all uniform.
Okay.
Okay, so I might have, 6 barrels in one block, and I might have 7 or 8 in another block. And so when I do my blends for my reserves, I always do those first.
Right.
Okay, and then whatever's left goes
That
into
goes in
this.
the estate.
And there's always a leftover tank where just anything that's left over goes into that, and I call that mix, and that goes in the estate as well.
There you go. Okay.
So that's how it's done. So it's pretty close, but it's
Yeah.
not exact.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's got nice texture. It's kind of, I don't know, it's pretty classic Pinot.
It's got a lovely mouthfeel, and it's light. It's light on its feet in my mouth.
Yeah.
It's not. And then there's the savory notes in the back.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of length to it.
Yeah.
So.
It does, and that was a really hot year like we have now. And because we dry farm, those vines are struggling. They're shutting down when it gets really hot like this. We have the spiky heat. And so you actually slow down on the ripening, even though you have a lot of cumulative heat. And that gives it that kind of, that texture that's softer, right? And a little bit lighter on your palate.
Yeah.
And, that Pinot is that's fine for Pinot,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Then we'll do the 14 next, and you'll see a huge difference
Complete
because it wasn't spiky heat. It never got to 100. So you just have layer upon layer upon layer of fruit. And it's a lot of black and blue. And red fruit, you know, it's different layers. And it's a very fruitful wine, but you know, it's a 2014, so it's got time in the bottle, and so it's developed. It's the tannins have resolved. It's smoothed out. I think it's very smooth, and it's developing some earthiness now. So pretty much doing what we would like it to do. Yeah, you don't get that same cola berry that you got on the 15. It's more fruity.
Yeah, you don't have the cola at all.
All right, this is the 2013, which I really, you know, I always say this is the year that separated the men from the boys in Willamette Valley, because it was a little challenging for some in the vineyard. And it just was one that I worked on and, you know, stuck to my practices, and it worked out really well for me. And it's just a beautiful thing. These are tartrates.
Gotcha. Yep.
Some wine diamonds on there, so I'm just getting it so
There you
they don't
go.
go in our glass.
Yep.
Yeah. Kind of pretty.
They are.
Yeah. That's from lack of full cold stabilization,
Gotcha. Right.
which is a good thing,
Yeah.
because it tends to strip the wine if you freeze it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine so. I mean, so many people do the cold stabilization, and like, I don't mind the tartrate crystals, and really it doesn't impact the wine in any other way.
Well, I mean, I do it. I just don't fully do
You
it.
don't fully do it.
You
Okay.
know, and usually the wine doesn't get that cold. But in
Right.
2013, it was 11 degrees 3 days in a row here, and just some of the wine that was in the storage here, not in the warehouse, got cold, and now we're finding it every once in a while.
Gotcha.
And it's like, wine diamonds. So then I just explain to people what they are.
Yep.
You know, and
Yep.
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, so this is going to be the lightest of the three, or I say silky. It has the best aromatics of the three to my nose, and my senses. And it's I mean, one of the main features is the texture. It's so silky, and then it's still got really good flavors, and it's got because the fruit is lighter because it wasn't one of those really hot years. You get more of the secondary and tertiary aromas and flavors out of the wine.
Okay.
So you get this really nice spicy finish from the barrels.
Great, because the primary notes were a little more subtle in that
Yes.
year. Okay.
Yeah, I can smell this all day. It just reminds me of like Mother Earth. It just has this really cool, very pleasant to me. It comes across as more tannic,
Yeah.
but that's because the fruit is lighter. It's not because there's actually more tannins,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
You're just getting that spicy characteristic out of the barrel, and right at the finish you get this like little spicy surprise that I think is really cool. And it's just so silky.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get texture like that. I mean, that happened in the vineyard. That wasn't anything I did.
Right.
I mean, I did
Yeah,
the farming.
you
but-
were in the vineyard too.
Yeah,
So yeah, you
yeah.
get some credit there. Yeah.
But yeah, but Mother Nature delivered that. We did, you know, we stuck to our guns. It was a record early bud break, and a lot of people assume they're going to have extra time to ripen in the fall, so they didn't thin aggressively prior to veraison,
Right.
like they probably should have. And I did. And I was able to pick before this typhoon came. We had a typhoon in the fall that came out of the South China Sea, and you know, you go around to the tasting rooms, if they're even pouring 13s, most of them aren't now, but if they were, they will tell you, oh, it was a colder year. It really wasn't. It was a very warm summer, you know, a lot like 14, where we had a lot of 90s, but then the rains came early, and it was like 80 degrees during the typhoon, so it was the worst combination of moisture and heat for botrytis, and there was just a lot of damaged fruit coming in. And I was making my wine at the winemaker studio that year, and I was the only winery out of 14 wineries that brought my fruit in before the rain. The only one.
Now it's time to create our pairing. We paired the Utopia 2017 Pinot Noir with lavender Earl Grey tea smoked tuna with roasted golden beets and rosemary. While this dish may sound fancy, and look fancy for that matter, it's easier than you think to make. You can smoke the tuna on the stove with a wok and a metal vegetable steamer. To create our elegant presentation, we used nested bowls, the smaller for the tuna and beets, the larger beneath it filled with fresh rosemary and star anise. We put the kettle on and added a bit of the hot water to the bottom of the bowl, allowing the steam and aromas to rise as we enjoyed the dish. These additional aromas, as well as the lavender Earl Grey tea that we smoked the tuna with, and our marinade of ginger garlic tea and blood orange juice, and of course the earthy notes from the beets, all combined to create a beautiful pairing with this wine. That's a wrap on this episode, but there is so much more on Utopia Vineyard and Ribbon Ridge. For details and information, visit our YouTube page and subscribe. And watch for our next episode of the Scenic Route as we head west to the Yamhill Carlton AVA and visit with Steve Lutz of Lenny Estate. See you next time on The Scenic Route.